The day my father's hidden debts surfaced like a storm from a clear sky, I lost the only home I'd ever known. A modest apartment in a sleepy Midwestern town where secrets stayed buried under layers of polite silence. At 25, I'd built my life around caution, shaped by a childhood under my mother's rigid rules after she fled an abusive marriage, vowing never to let vulnerability crack our armor. She taught me that trust was a luxury for the naive, and I carried that lesson like a shield. My innocence not from ignorance but from a deliberate choice to guard my heart against the world's sharper edges. I'd worked as a librarian, surrounded by stories of passion I read but never lived, my days predictable and safe until the creditor's calls shattered it all. With no family left and savings depleted, I packed what little I owned into a single suitcase and boarded a Greyhound bus to Chicago, drawn by a distant cousin's vague promise of a couch and temporary work. The city loomed ahead, a glittering beast of steel and glass. Everything my small-town world wasn't. Chaotic, demanding, utterly unforgiving. Rain slicked the streets as I stepped off the bus at Union Station, the downpour mirroring the ache in my chest. My cousin Lila had texted an hour ago, "Sorry, kid. Lost my lease. Try the clubs on Rush Street. They're always hiring dancers." Dancers. The word twisted in my gut. I'd taken ballet classes as a child, a quiet rebellion against mother's disapproval. But that was years ago. Still, desperation has its own rhythm. Soaked and shivering, I followed GPS to the Velvet Shadow, a upscale nightclub pulsing with bass even in the late afternoon. The sign glowed crimson against the gray sky, promising escape for those who could afford it. I pushed through the heavy doors, the scent of leather and expensive cologne hitting me like a wall. Inside, the club was dimly lit, tables shrouded in velvet drapes, a stage empty but for spotlights casting long shadows. A bartender polished glasses behind the bar, eyeing me with mild curiosity. "Auditions are tomorrow," he said, voice flat. "I'm here now," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need work, tonight." He shrugged and disappeared into the back. Minutes stretched into an eternity until a man emerged from an office door at the far end of the room. He was 40, or near it, broad-shouldered and impeccably dressed in a tailored black shirt that hugged his frame, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms corded with quiet strength. Dark hair streaked with silver at the temples, eyes the color of aged whiskey, sharp, assessing. Marcus Hale, the owner, I would learn later, but in that moment he was simply authority incarnate, striding toward me with the controlled grace of someone who bent the world to his will. "You the walk-in?" His voice was low, commanding without effort, carrying the faint trace of a Chicago accent, roughened by years of hard decisions. I nodded, water dripping from my hair onto the polished floor. "Alara Voss, I dance. I need a job." He stopped a foot away, close enough that I caught the subtle scent of sandalwood on his skin. His gaze traveled over me, not leering, but dissecting, as if weighing my resolve against the fragility of my soaked blouse and jeans. "This isn't a strip joint, Ms. Voss. We do burlesque. Class. You got a resume?" "No. Honesty was my only card. But I have this." I slipped off my jacket, the rain making it cling like a second skin, and moved to the stage without waiting for permission. The spotlight caught me as I began. A simple routine from memory, hips swaying in a slow arc, arms tracing invisible lines of longing. It wasn't seductive. It was raw, a dance born of loss. Each step a quiet defiance of the fear coiling in my belly. I poured my guarded heart into it, the music from hidden speakers syncing with my breath. He watched from the shadows, arms crossed, face unreadable. When I finished, breathless, the silence stretched. Then, "You're hired. One night. Prove you belong." Relief flooded me, sharp and unexpected. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." He jerked his head toward the office. "Contract first." The office was a stark contrast to the club's opulence, a penthouse suite overlooking Lake Michigan, walls lined with books on business and loss, a single photo on the desk. A younger Marcus with a woman whose smile mirrored his own faded warmth. He slid papers across the desk. Non-compete. 6-month minimum. Room and board upstairs if you commit. Room and board? I scanned the fine print. The Velvet Shadow owned the entire building. a high-rise fortress in the heart of the Gold Coast, where Chicago's elite mingled with shadows. Accepting meant surrendering my independence, embedding myself in his world of control and neon nights. My small-town instincts screamed to run, but the alternative was the streets. Why the suite? Most owners don't lose their sister to a drunk driver outside their door. His words cut clean, revealing the scar beneath his armor. Betrayal lingered in his tone, not from her death 5 years ago, but from the guilt that he hadn't controlled the chaos that took her. Since then, he'd built an empire of precision. Schedules, contracts, no room for the unpredictable. I keep my people close, safe. You dance for me, you live here. No exceptions. Opposites clashed in that revelation. I craved the freedom of anonymity, the safety of solitude. He demanded structure, his wounded heart armored in dominance. Yet his protector instinct flickered, offering shelter to a stranger, as if mending his past through me. And if I say no, you won't. Certainty edged his voice. Sign. My pen hovered. Mother's voice echoed. Never let them in. But the rain outside hammered harder, and the emptiness of my suitcase mocked me. I signed, the ink sealing my fate. That night I debuted. The club filled with suited men and glittering women, the air thick with cigar smoke and whispered deals. I took the stage in a borrowed corset of midnight silk, the fabric whispering against my skin like a secret. My dance was a slow unraveling, not of clothes, but of restraint. Eyes locked on Marcus at his corner table. I moved for him alone, each turn a challenge to his control. He leaned forward, jaw tight, fingers drumming the glass in his hand. Tension crackled, invisible threads pulling us closer. Afterward, applause thundered, but his nod was the only validation I sought. Not bad, he said, leading me to the elevator. Suites on 15. Rules, curfew at 2, no guests. My word is law. The penthouse was vast, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the stormy city, a kitchen of marble and steel, my room a serene oasis with a balcony overlooking the lake. This is too much, I murmured, suitcase dwarfed by the space. Get used to it. He paused at the door, vulnerability cracking his facade for a split second. You remind me of her. Strong, unbroken. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut. Alone, I sank onto the bed, heart pounding. I'd chosen this, forced proximity in his gilded cage, for survival. But as thunder rolled over the water, I felt the stakes sharpen, my need for independence clashing with his hunger for control. He wanted to own the rhythm of my world. I would dance until he lost the beat. The next morning he knocked. Breakfast, then rehearsal, no choice. Our worlds had merged, his protector's shadow falling over my guarded steps. I followed him down, the elevator's descent mirroring my plunge into the unknown. Days blurred into a routine of his making. Mornings, coffee in the penthouse kitchen, his eyes lingering on my unadorned hands as I stirred sugar with deliberate slowness. Afternoons, rehearsals in the empty club, his corrections precise. Slower here. Feel it. His hand hovering near my waist, never touching. Evenings, performances where his gaze anchored me, a silent promise of safety amid the crowd's roar. One night, after a flawless set, he waited backstage. You're good, Alara. Too good for this. His voice softened, the wounded hero peeking through. Why dance now? Life doesn't ask permission. I met his eyes, my guard slipping just enough. I need to stand on my own. He nodded, respect flickering. Then stand, but not alone. That was the hook sinking deeper. His control wasn't chains. It was the illusion of safety I secretly craved. Yet I pushed back, skipping a curfew once, testing boundaries. He found me on the balcony at dawn, rain slicked again. Rules exist for a reason. So do choices. My whisper challenged him. Tension hummed, his hand brushing mine on the railing, an almost touch that sent sparks through the air. He pulled back, control snapping into place. Get inside. I obeyed, but the seed was planted. Forced into his world by contract and necessity, I stayed, not just for the job, but for the quiet war brewing between us. He wanted to orchestrate my every step. I would dance until his heart followed. By week's end, the lease on my old life was dust. Here, in his domain, our emotional journey ignited. Opposites drawn inexorably close, trust a fragile first step on a stage lit by vulnerability. Living in Marcus Hale's penthouse felt like dancing on a tightrope stretched over a city of glass. Every step deliberate, every glance a risk of falling. The velvet shadow consumed my days, its rhythm dictating mine, mornings blending coffee with his curt instructions, afternoons spent perfecting routines under his watchful eye, nights performing for crowds who saw my body but not my heart. At 25, I'd guarded that heart fiercely, my small-town upbringing a fortress against the world's chaos. Mother's voice still whispered, "Keep them out." But Marcus's world, opulent, controlled, suffocatingly intimate, chipped at my defenses, forcing me into a proximity that felt like both cage and sanctuary. His suite was a study in contrasts. Sleek marble counters where we ate breakfast in silence, his gaze lingering on my hands as I sliced fruit. Floor-to-ceiling windows framing Chicago's restless skyline, mirroring the tension between us. He was 40, a man carved from loss and ambition. His sister's death 5 years prior, a wound he wore like armor. He never spoke of her again, but I saw her shadow in the photo on his desk, in the way he locked doors twice, in the curfew he enforced with ironclad precision. Control was his lifeline, and I was the anomaly threatening to unravel it. Our mornings began with rituals that felt like choreography. He'd leave notes, rehearsal at 2, don't be late. His handwriting sharp as his voice. I'd push back, arriving 5 minutes late, my hair still damp from a shower, testing the edges of his rules. He'd frown, jaw tight, but never raised his voice. Instead, he'd adjust my posture during practice, his fingers hovering an inch from my shoulder, the almost touch sparking heat I refused to name. "Slower," he'd say, eyes locked on mine, not the stage. "Make them feel your story." I didn't tell him my story. How mother's fear of men shaped my solitude. How I'd chosen books over boys. How dancing was my only rebellion until debt drove me here. But he saw it anyway, in the way I held myself taut, my movements precise but guarded. "You're holding back," he said one afternoon, stopping the music mid-routine. "Why?" "You don't get to know that." My voice was sharp, but my pulse betrayed me, racing under his scrutiny. He stepped closer, the air between us thick. "I'm not your enemy, Ilara." "Then stop acting like my keeper." I turned away, heart pounding, the space between us a battlefield of unspoken truths. That friction defined our days. Forced proximity wove us tighter, shared meals, late-night talks in the kitchen when rehearsals ran long, his coat draped over my shoulders after a chilly walk back from the club. Each moment was a thread pulling us closer, my guarded heart warring with his need to shield. He was a wounded hero, his scars hidden in the way he checked the security cameras, the way he flinched when a glass broke, as if chaos could undo him again. I was the opposite, craving freedom but tethered by necessity. My resilience a quiet challenge to his control. One evening, after a performance that left the crowd roaring, he found me backstage adjusting my corset's laces. "You were untouchable tonight," he said, voice low, almost reverent. He handed me a glass of water, his fingers brushing mine, a fleeting touch that lingered in the air. I froze, the almost moment stealing my breath. He stepped back, control snapping into place, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of something softer. That softness grew in small gestures. He left a book of poetry on my nightstand, Rilke, dog-eared at a page about longing. When I struggled with a new routine, he stayed late, adjusting the lighting to ease my nerves, his patience a silent apology for his earlier demands. I reciprocated, leaving a playlist of jazz on his desk, tracks that matched the slow burn of our unspoken connection. Trust crept in, fragile but real, built on these quiet exchanges. The midpoint came on a stormy night, the city cloaked in rain that battered the penthouse windows. Power flickered, plunging the club into darkness during rehearsal. I found him in his office, staring at the photo of his sister, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. "You don't have to stay," he said, not looking up. Storm's bad. Take the night. I sat across from him, the darkness amplifying the weight of our silence. Why do you keep everyone so close? My voice was soft, probing the wound I sensed. It's not just safety, is it? He exhaled, the sound heavy with years of guilt. Clara, my sister, she was driving home from here. I told her to stay, but she didn't listen. I couldn't stop it. His eyes met mine, raw, unguarded. I failed her. I won't fail anyone else. The confession cracked something in me. I lost my mother to her own fears, I said, words spilling before I could stop them. She taught me to hide, to never trust. But I'm tired of hiding, Marcus. I just don't know how to stop. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the space between us shrinking. You're already stopping. Every time you dance, you let the world in. My throat tightened. In that moment, I saw him. Not the club owner, not the man who demanded control, but the one who carried loss like a shadow. And he saw me. Not as a dancer under contract, but as someone whose strength mirrored his own. The storm raged outside, but inside, trust took root, fragile but undeniable. Days later, the tension peaked. We were alone in the studio, working on a duet for a special event. The choreography demanded closeness. His hand on my waist, my palm against his chest, our breaths sinking. His touch was steady, but his eyes betrayed a struggle, the wounded hero fighting his own pull. Ilara, he murmured, my name a question and a plea. Our faces were inches apart, the air charged with an almost kiss that neither of us dared to claim. My heart raced, my guard crumbling, but fear, of him, of myself, held me back. Then came the misunderstanding. At a staff meeting, I overheard him on a call, discussing a new dancer. She's replaceable, he said, his voice cold. The words hit like a blade, slicing through the trust we'd built. Was I just another employee? Another piece of his controlled empire? I stormed out, ignoring his call after me, retreating to the balcony where the city's lights blurred through my tears. He found me an hour later, rain-soaked and unyielding. You didn't hear the whole call, he said, voice rough. I was talking about a temp. Not you. Then why say it? I snapped, my guard slamming back into place. You control everything, Marcus. But you can't control me. I don't want to. His admission was raw, his hands clenched as if fighting to stay still. I'm trying to keep you safe, not own you. The truth hung between us, heavy and untested. I wanted to believe him, but Mother's warnings echoed louder. I turned away, the separation a chasm neither of us knew how to cross. Yet in that moment, I felt the depth of my attachment, a longing not just for freedom but for him, for the man who saw my strength and mirrored my scars. Our worlds, once opposites, were now entangled. The slow burn of trust teetering on the edge of something deeper. But the misunderstanding lingered, a barrier we'd have to dismantle, forcing us to confront the feelings we could no longer deny. The misunderstanding with Marcus lingered like a bruise, coloring every glance, every shared silence in the penthouse. I danced each night at the velvet shadow, my movements sharper, more defiant, as if I could reclaim my independence through the spotlight. At 25, I'd built my life on guarding my heart, a lesson carved by Mother's warnings and a small-town life that taught me to fear exposure. But Marcus, with his wounded intensity and need for control, had slipped past my defenses, and the overheard words, "She's replaceable," still stung, a reminder of how fragile trust could be. Yet, in the quiet moments, his coat over my shoulders, his eyes softening when I laughed, I felt the pull of something deeper, something I both craved and feared. The crisis came on a Friday night. The club packed with Chicago's elite, their laughter sharp as the clink of crystal glasses. I was mid-performance, the stage my sanctuary, when a drunk patron lunged forward, his hand grazing my arm as he slurred, "Come on, sweetheart, dance closer." The crowd blurred, my pulse spiking with a fear I hadn't felt since childhood, when Mother's ex-husband's shadow loomed too large. Before I could react, Marcus was there, a force of quiet fury, his hand on the man's collar, escorting him out with a steel-edged calm. The protector instinct in him flared, raw and unyielding, his eyes meeting mine from across the room. Not with control, but with a promise. You're safe. Backstage, my hands trembled as I adjusted my corset. Marcus found me, his usual composure frayed, shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing the tension in his forearms. You okay? His voice was low, urgent. I nodded, but my guard wavered, the weight of his presence unraveling me. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. He stepped closer, the air between us charged. I won't let anyone hurt you, Alara. Not here. Not ever. His words cracked something open, a vulnerability I'd spent years burying. I wanted to push back, to cling to the independence I'd fought for, but his sincerity held me still. Why does it matter so much? I whispered, my voice betraying the question I'd avoided. Why me? He exhaled, his hand hovering near mine, an almost touch that sent warmth through my skin. Because you see me, not the club, not the money, me. His eyes, usually so guarded, were raw now, the wounded hero laid bare. I lost Clara because I couldn't protect her. I won't lose you. The confession hit like a wave, washing away the last of my resistance. I'd spent weeks fighting his control, but this wasn't control. It was care, born of his scars and my own. My guarded heart, shaped by mother's fear and my own choice to stay untouched, trembled at the edge of surrender. I wanted him. Not just his protection, but his flaws, his quiet strength. The way he'd left Rilke on my nightstand like a secret offering. That night in the penthouse, the city's lights glittering beyond the windows, I made my choice. We sat on the balcony, the air cool, the storm clouds gone. I've never let anyone in, I said, my voice steady despite the truth it carried. Not like this. I've kept myself untouched, not because I'm naive, but because I was afraid of losing myself. He turned to me, his gaze soft but piercing. You're not losing anything, Alara, you're choosing. The word, choosing, unlocked something. My virginity wasn't a prize or a barrier. It was a part of my story, one I'd guarded not out of shame but out of self-preservation. Now, with him, it was a gift I could offer, not to be taken but shared. I trust you, I said, the words a leap, my heart bare. I'm not afraid anymore. He reached for my hand, his touch gentle, deliberate, as if memorizing the weight of my trust. I don't deserve that, he murmured, his voice thick with the guilt of his past. But I'll spend every day trying to. We didn't rush. There was no grand gesture, no sweeping passion like the novels I'd shelved back home. Instead, we moved closer, his fingers tracing mine, our breaths sinking in the quiet. When he kissed me, it was slow, deliberate, a promise woven into every brush of his lips. The intimacy that followed was a fade-to-black moment, not of spectacle, but of safety, built on the trust we'd forged through weeks of almost moments and shared scars. It was love as connection, not conquest. His wounded heart meeting my guarded one in a space where control dissolved into mutual surrender. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the penthouse, and with it came clarity. The misunderstanding, his cold words on the phone, felt distant now, a misstep we'd overcome. But a new threat loomed. My contract was nearing its end, and with it, the question of my place in his world. I'd come to Chicago for independence, not love, but the two had intertwined. Could I stay in his glittering, controlled empire without losing myself? Or would he let go of his need to orchestrate everything to keep me? The answer came at breakfast, the kitchen warm with the scent of coffee. Marcus slid a new contract across the table, but this one was different. No non-compete, no curfew, just a partnership. Stay, he said, his voice stripped of its usual command. Not because I need you here, but because I want you. As my equal. I studied the paper, my heart steady. My small-town roots and his high-rise world had clashed, but they'd merged too in the quiet moments we'd built. I signed not out of necessity, but because I chose him, his scars, his strength, his surrender to me. I'm not going anywhere, I said, meeting his eyes. But I'm still dancing my own way. He smiled, a rare, unguarded curve of his lips. I wouldn't want it otherwise. The days that followed were a quiet peace. I danced at the velvet shadow, not for survival, but for joy. My routines a blend of my resilience and his faith in me. He loosened his grip on the club's rigid structure, trusting his staff, trusting me. Our opposites, a track dynamic softened into harmony. My independence a counterpoint to his protector instinct. Our love a balance of strength and vulnerability. One evening, as we stood on the balcony, the city sprawling below, I felt the weight of my old fears lift. Mother's warnings, my guarded heart, the debts that drove me here, they were shadows, not chains. Marcus wrapped his arm around me, his warmth a steady anchor. "You changed everything," he said, his voice low, reverent. I leaned into him, my heart full. We changed each other. Love wasn't possession or control. It was transformation, a dance we'd learned together, step by vulnerable step. In that moment, with the city's pulse echoing our own, I knew we'd found our rhythm. Not his, not mine, but ours. A harmony born of trust and surrender.